You're going to see a little pop-up message come up, and if you're not comfortable being Lorelei, this is for you. If you're not comfortable being on a recorded video, you can just keep your camera off. That's not a problem. So firstly, I would like to take a moment just to thank everybody for joining us today. And I will do a quick introduction to our Glow and Grow presenter, Cheryl Scott, who is a new hashtag Proud Paro Woman. We are so excited to welcome you to our Wednesday Glow and Grow webinar series. And today, Cheryl is going to be presenting to us on why you want to be proactive in utilizing legal services for your business. As a business growth advisor with Paro Center for Women's Enterprise, there are 3 things that I noticed that small business owners are not doing and they are not prioritizing. And 1, that's getting insurance. 2, setting up financials, getting a bookkeeper, getting your cash flow projections, all that fun stuff. And 3, legal. Nobody is ever talking about the legal components that might be associated with their business. So without further ado, Cheryl, I give the stage to you, and we are very much looking forward to receiving this information that you'll be sharing with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. As Melissa mentioned, I am new to Paro, so still kind of working my way through the website and all the different, there's a lot. I am so impressed by what this organization is doing to help women entrepreneurs. It is phenomenal. So I'm still learning, but look forward to meeting and getting to know as many of you as possible. Let me give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm actually on career number 3. I started out in advertising, specifically help wanted advertising, pre-internet. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but very niche market. Basically, I was helping employers to hire. Then I transitioned into career coaching and was helping people figure out what they wanted to do with their lives, get funding to go back to school, find new jobs, and so forth. And that was very rewarding. I loved what I did because I love helping people. My challenge was in my last employment role, I was actually working for a government agency. And if any of you have ever worked with the government, you know that you end up doing far too much paperwork and not enough helping people. So it was a little bit frustrating. So now I'm on career number 3 with Legal Shield. I am an independent associate and I'm loving it. Now I get to help people in way more ways. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if people find me and reach out, I will still help with career coaching and I still love to make connections with employers and job seekers, but so love what I'm doing. But my career coaching actually kind of fed into this and why I wanted to help entrepreneurs in particular. And, you know, in the 2008 and 9 recession, I had so many clients say to me, oh, if I don't get a job right away, I'll just hang up a sign and be self-employed. Ooh, slow down. It is not that simple. I mean, yeah, you can do that, but what do you know about starting and running a business? And if you build it, they will come, but only if they know it's there. So what the heck do you know about marketing? So my advice to you is do what you do best, hire out the rest to pros. You're going to need a good accountant, a good lawyer or legal service. You're going to need someone to help with marketing. You're going to need a business coach. And when you start making money, you need a financial advisor, not to mention an insurance agent and just a whole host of, I call it your A-team behind you to make sure that you are successful. There's some things that you can do on your own for a little while, and it's good to at least be aware of those things, like bookkeeping, for example. That's record keeping. You know, if you think you can handle that initially until you can afford to hire somebody, great. But you don't necessarily want to go and do your own taxes. You're probably going to miss some write-offs and not get back as much money as you otherwise might. Now, the truth is, you're not going to know the difference. You're not going to know that you missed that, but it is going to cost you money. Well, if you screw up in the legal area, that could cost you your business potentially. So that's why it is so important. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Legal issues are a part of life. Now, we think of legal as being big, scary, nasty stuff, right? Getting sued, going to court. But that's not necessarily the case. What about incorporation? Registering a business, contracts? There's a whole wills and powers of attorney and estate planning. There's a whole bunch of things that are actually positive. Purchasing real estate, selling real estate actually is more positive in this market than perhaps purchasing, adopting a child. So many things. Starting a business that is proactive or can be proactive and definitely positive. You need to know that there's folks out there that can help you. Now, the answer we often get is, yeah, but lawyers are crazy expensive. And they are, right? I mean, the wealthy few can afford to keep lawyers on retainer. You might have a lawyer in the family. Great. Make sure you use that resource because you're incredibly lucky. Yes, the poorest of the poor can access legal aid, but in all honesty, and having worked in social services, I mean, you've got to be beyond poor. And it's limited, right? Very, very limited. So that's really not a good resource for much of anybody, especially not business owners. And we've done surveys and business owners, 60% had legal needs within a 2-year period, and those that hired lawyers spent way too much. Not that it wasn't worth it. The results they got, absolutely. But why spend high amounts if you don't have to? We're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. But let's face it, legal just is not small budget friendly. It's just not. Here are the top 10 legal issues faced by small businesses. And surprisingly, during COVID, this didn't change a lot. They perhaps became a little more specific if we look at HR and employee-related matters. Employees didn't understand their rights or know their rights. Employers weren't understanding their obligations. Good example, PPE equipment. Who the heck is supposed to supply it? The employer, the employee, who's supposed to pay for it, right? That's just one of so many examples. Here in Ontario, employees have the right to refuse work if it's unsafe. Well, who determines what's unsafe? And then how do you go about that? Do you just not show up? No, there's certain processes and things in place. That is crazy complicated. As an employer, how do you deal with that if somebody calls and says, I'm not coming to work because it's unsafe? Well, I mean, in theory, anything could be considered unsafe. So how does all that work? Yeah, you don't have to navigate these things alone. I already mentioned contracts. How many of you have ever signed a contract that you didn't totally understand, or maybe you didn't even take the time to read it? And please don't tell me you've never signed contracts, because if you have a cell phone or you have internet, which you obviously do, because here you are, you've signed a contract, whether you physically signed one or not, right? In this virtual world that we're now in, a lot of it is just kind of assumed. If there's disclaimers, right? If you're here, you're agreeing to ABC, just like the disclaimer at the beginning of this Zoom presentation. So wouldn't it be nice to just send your contracts off to the lawyers, let them read it, give you the Coles Notes version, and let you know if there's anything of concern? What about contracts you're asking other people to sign? Wouldn't it be nice to know, yeah, you can go and download stuff from the internet, but how do you know, A, it's perfect for your situation, your geographic location, and up to date? Let's face it, so many things have changed during COVID in terms of laws and regulations, and it's just been nuts. How are we all supposed to keep up? Again, stick to what you do best and hire out the rest to the pros. Trust me, it will save you so much stress, time, and money in the long run. There's over 101 reasons why businesses would want to use lawyers. This is just a small sampling. I don't expect you to read them all. And yes, some of them are worded a little US, questions pertaining to hiring contract versus salaried employees. In the States, they call them 1099 W-2. We just have different language, same situations. Now, what if you're growing your business and you've got locations on both sides of the border? Ooh, how does that affect things? Interesting. What if you've got challenges with your landlord? Yeah, there are some other things out there, but if they're not helping, where the heck do you go? Right? I mean, it's a little bit crazy. Down at the bottom, last time you updated your wills and powers of attorney, did you have your business then? If not, you better be updating your estate documents. And little known fact, if you have a succession plan for your business, which you should, and you should work on that with both your financial planner, your accountant, and your lawyer, if you don't also have a will that matches, that succession plan is useless. And vice versa. So, little known fact, and that's here in Ontario specifically, and other parts of Canada. The demand for legal services continues to skyrocket. Yes, partly due to COVID. The lawyers I work with have been crazy busy since COVID started. You know what? Most of them became lawyers because they want to help people. They want you to succeed in business. So they do enjoy what they do. Again, a whole lot of information. I don't expect you to read it all necessarily. And you don't want to be picking out the things that you're not going to use a lawyer for. Pick out the one or two that you might. You know, have you ever just thought to yourself, I wished I had a lawyer in the family so I could ask this question? You know, I had a business owner, one of my Legal Shield members is a small business owner, and he called the lawyers back in the summer and just said, hey, do I have to pay my part-time employees on the civic holiday in August? It's not technically a stat, because it's a provincial holiday, not a national holiday. And he had some part-time employees, some were casual, some were contract, all sorts of different situations. And turned out the answer differed in each of those situations. So it was really good. He went to a lawyer and got that answer versus Googling. I mean, first of all, who has time to spend all the time on Google? Because isn't there far too much information when you put in a question like that? It's just insane. And let's be honest, Google does not have a law degree. And Wikipedia is filled out by folks like you and I, and I'm sure other folks are out there making sure that the information's correct, but it doesn't have to be. It's not regulated, so don't necessarily rely on what's on the internet. And what is true in BC or Alberta or Wyoming might not be true here in Ontario. What was true in 2018, 2010, 1999 might not be true now, right? Things change quickly. Very quickly. Now, let me just back up for a second here. Didn't want to change that too fast on you. I want to give you a couple of stories. You think, well, I've never used a lawyer. I'm good people. I thought exactly the same thing. But we did need our wills and powers of attorney done. Expensive, but worth it. And that's when I found Legal Shield. I'm going to give you a few different business related stories. One of my members, just before COVID, summer before, decided he was going to start a landscaping company. It was him and his lawnmower out of his garage. Pretty simple. Except he didn't know anything about starting a business. He already had Legal Shield because his wife and him had had their first child recently. So he called me and said, hey, how can you help me out with my business? Of course, happy to help. Set him up with the business supplement. He called the law firm and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? How much can you help me with? Well, they walked him through how to register the business, setting up his contracts. They reviewed all the contracts that he was signing. Fast forward 4 years. He now has 10 employees, a 3,000 square foot space, a ton of equipment, and he's looking to incorporate and expand his business further this year because he's figured out how to make it year round and not with snow plowing, which in Ontario is a bit of a challenge for a landscaper. So kudos to him. But he said to me, honestly, Cheryl, lawyers are expensive. If I had not had Legal Shield, I wouldn't have spoken to a lawyer for probably most of the things I use Legal Shield for. I would have gotten contracts off the internet and hoped that they worked. I would have read my contracts, crossed my fingers that I understood what I was signing, signed them anyways. I might have called a lawyer for firing, maybe. But I probably would have hired employees, put them on salary, and wasn't even aware that I could make them contract, which of course makes perfect sense when they're seasonal. So many things. He actually attributes using lawyers to part of his success. Because he said, otherwise, I don't know where I'd be today. I probably would have screwed something up just based on, I didn't know what I didn't know. I know lots about landscaping, period. Well, and now 4 years, he also knows a fair bit about being a dad as well. But, just suffice it to say, you don't always want to be learn as you go necessarily. Another young lady. So in addition to the story I told earlier about helping folks start their businesses and warning them that they need this A team behind them, the other reason that I started my Legal Shield business, or more correctly, found my niche with helping entrepreneurs, is a friend of mine introduced me to a lady who relatively new to Canada. She, long story short, immigrated here because of a man, started a hair salon in downtown Toronto. Prime location. She's apparently a whiz with hair. Too far for me to commute, unfortunately. Anyway, 6 months in is when I met her. She was doing phenomenal to the point where she'd actually had to hire a couple of people and was busier than heck. She was already into the 6 figures. I said, well, why does our mutual friend think that you need legal help? And she said, well, I've got somebody threatening to sue me over trademark, because stupidly, it never occurred to me to research the name that I picked. She said, I'm also getting hassled by one of my employees saying that they need me, they want overtime and benefits and holiday pay. And I don't know that I really need to do that, because technically they're not employees. I've been paying them cash under the table. And oh my, okay, that's another whole topic. And yeah, she'd registered her business, but anything else that wasn't hair and nails, she either didn't know or forgot about. Well, if she had not gotten legal help when she did, because she was also had not registered for HST, wasn't charging or paying HST, had she not got Legal Shield or legal help when she did, she'd probably be out of business shortly thereafter. The trademark thing was actually solved relatively easily because the other party was in a completely different industry. And the lawyers simply said, well, what if she simply changes her name, promises not to use it, issues an apology? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. She properly hired the employees and set all of that up in place, so solved that. Let's be honest, if she had not suddenly caught up with the HST, the government does not accept the excuse that you didn't know. That's just not acceptable. They don't care. Let's be honest. She would have been out of business very quickly. So I found Legal Shield a number of years ago while I was still employed. And typically the legal industry is complicated, hard to access, and as I keep pointing out, crazy expensive. Legal Shield is the exact opposite. We've actually been around for 50 years. This was our 50th anniversary in the United States. In Canada, we've been here about 23, 24 years. I'm not exactly sure what the date is of our anniversary, but we are protecting well over 4 million lives. And this is actually out of date because we're over 170,000 businesses. We've got law firms in every state or province, so they're well aware of the rules in your specific areas. And of course, I'm going to say amazing things about Legal Shield, of course, but I'm not the only one. We've been written up by Forbes, talked about on CNBC. We've got a A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You can't do better than that. Apparently on Facebook, we're like 4.85. I have no idea what that even means, but I know it's good. So that's pretty exciting. And what I am on a mission to do is to educate as many people as possible that this service exists. But more importantly, because yeah, some of you have lawyers in the family, some of you can afford lawyers and you've got a lawyer that you love, and that is amazing. But I want to make sure everyone's using legal services proactively. So that preventative stuff, right? On the personal side, advice, contracts reviewed, preferably before you sign them. Our lawyers will write letters and make calls on your behalf, and that's included in our membership. I mean, when I first got the membership, I actually had a mechanic that wanted to charge me twice for the same repair. They replaced my ball joints. I picked the car up. I didn't even get 3 blocks and it was making this horrific noise. And you know, when you're driving and you hear a horrific noise, you're thinking, is that me? Or is that the truck or the bus or whoever? Yeah. I looked around, everybody was looking at me. So clearly it was my car. Did a U-turn, went back to the mechanic, said something's wrong. Left it with them. They called the next day and said, well, the ball joint's broken, and turned, cracked the control arms. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I can't drive it. They said, don't worry, we're crediting what we did yesterday. We'll only charge you for parts, blah, blah, blah. Fine. When I went to pick the car up again, I'd already paid about $500. There's another $550 bill sitting there. Like, wait a minute, this was either faulty parts or faulty workmanship. I shouldn't have to pay twice. Well, sorry, ma'am, I can't give you the keys if you don't pay the bill. That's our policy. So, well, just because it's your policy doesn't mean it's right. Where's your supervisor? Not here. Would the owner be here? No. Okay, well, you need to have them call me because I'm going to call my law firm. I pulled out my phone. I tapped my app. I spoke to the receptionist, explained the situation. She said, great, a lawyer will call you back within 8 business hours. I turned around and suddenly out of nowhere, there's the owner of the mechanic shop. So sorry, ma'am. This advisor is new. He didn't, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever. Fine. Ripped up the bill. I got my keys. Life is good. Now, had that not happened, the lawyers would have called me back. I suspect probably would have written a letter or, made a phone call on my behalf. But thankfully, we didn't even have to do that. We've already talked about wills a little bit. This is the last love letter to your family. I get it. People don't want to talk about death. You don't want to put it in the universe. And I certainly understand the law of attraction. But I also believe that if you take an umbrella, it won't rain. Now, let's face it. Death is inevitable. But if you put your wills in place, hopefully you won't need them for a very, very, very long time. And powers of attorney, hopefully you will need them never. So please, if you don't have them up to date, do so. Another fun little fact, if you've remarried, but don't have a new will, guess who might get all your stuff? Your ex. If that isn't motivation, I don't know what is. Our lawyers help with traffic ticket, just all these things on the screen. The list of what isn't included. I've never found anything our lawyers can't help with to one degree or another. What is not included comes at a 25% preferred member discount, as mentioned on the screen here. And that includes stuff that normally the lawyers would be in court for a substantial period of time. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. So nasty divorces or custodies, criminal charges, DUIs, like any of those things come at a 25% member discount. Everything else, help with speeding tickets, your wills, your powers of attorney, like all these other things that we've talked about, including family and domestic services, as long as they're not super nasty. So uncontested divorces and things, those are all included. Like huge, huge savings. Little over $1 a day here in Canada. How cool is that? And yes, the family and domestic does have 90-day waiting period, but that doesn't mean that you can't get advice, contracts reviewed, and all of those other things in the meantime to get prepared to finalize that separation or divorce. Plus, those are all things you don't want to enter into lightly. So 90 days is a good time to make sure, do you really want to do this? Now, all of you here are entrepreneurs, so let's look at the business side of things. We've got options when it comes to businesses. We've got we've got a business supplement that I talked about in terms, that's what that landscaper had. On top of the family plan, or sorry, with the family plan is $48 a month. It's just an extra $14.95 a month. And that makes the entire $48 a business expense, meaning you can write it off on your taxes. If you've got a partner, if you've got more than a handful of employees, if you've got complicated or substantial legal needs, maybe in your industry, collections is a huge issue and you need lots of collection letters. Well, then great, we've got some bigger plans. They start at $49. Our biggest one is $169, and that's for a business that has like 200-300 employees. Let's face it, if you've got 200 or 300 employees, you're going to spend more than that per hour just on HR issues alone. Because don't we all know, the more people in the mix, the more interesting things get, right?
Something that's interesting, Cheryl, just if you don't mind me kind of popping in, I used to work
Absolutely.
and so typically, you know, to take this all into consideration, because I think a lot of people, myself included, were like, I don't have the extra $40 a month or $50 a month. If for some reason something happens in your business and you need that support, you might get a 30-minute or a 1-hour free consultation. But typically that process afterwards is a lump sum deposit, as in the form of a retainer, which would very likely exceed what you would be paying for an entire year membership into these types of lawyer services through Legal Shield, right? So, and that would only cover one instance, right? So,
yep,
to be able to think that, you know, for $50 a month, you get both these personal and business type of legal support at any time throughout the year, right? And any opportunity that you need to call in to request help or support to get information, so you're not spending all that time on Google and getting misinformation. And like, it blows my mind at how accessible this support is and how reasonably cost effective it is. Right? It's an investment. Totally. It's an investment to protect yourself, and it's an investment to protect your business. And most of us,
it's a write-off.
Yeah, right.
Super, super cool. And yeah, you brought up a good point. I mean, one of the questions that I get asked, or one of the comments I get is, well, it seems too good to be true. And that was actually my response when I first heard about it. And most things that seem too good to be true, yeah, proceed with caution. Absolutely. But the way I describe it, Legal Shield it's a cost, we follow a cost sharing model similar to CAA, right? The whole parking lot might have CAA paying that small monthly membership fee. They're not all going to call the tow trucks today, right? One or two might, you know. Between my husband and I don't know how many times we've used our Legal Shield membership, but it tends to come in bunches. You know, a couple of years ago, my husband unfortunately got laid off due to COVID. We had them review his severance package. They went back and re-reviewed his original employment contract as well to let him know that he was free and clear to go get a job at a competitor if he wanted. Once he got a new job, they looked over the employment contract, the non-compete, the non-disclosure, and the COVID clauses that quite frankly didn't make any sense whatsoever to us, and they agreed. And then they suggested, you know, here, reword those COVID clauses, cross this out, add a comma, blah, 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 send it back, see what they say. They were fine with it. All of that, you know, that was what, like 5-6 different documents. Well, I know local lawyers here in Kitchener-Waterloo, $250 to review one document. I mean, that more than covered what we had paid in that year. We have paid or recouped more than we have ever spent, for sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I have a business. I get a membership with Legal Shield, and I have staff. are they able to contact Legal Shield if they have questions regarding their employment with me? Or do they have to have their own membership?
They would need their own personal membership. And yes, they could get questions answered. Now, the other thing is we can actually offer Legal Shield as an employee benefit. In that particular case, they can get questions answered and so forth. They can't take their employer to court using Legal Shield.
Right.
Because it does
an
protect
interesting
the employer.
concept that it's added as a benefit for the employee. I like that.
Well, it's pretty darn cool. I mean, it shows that you care about your employees, for one, but it also makes them more productive. So it is slightly selfish on the employer's part, because let's face it, we get a speeding ticket. We suddenly find out that we were named as executor of great aunt whoever's will and have to settle an estate. You know, like life just happens.
Yeah.
And what do? We either take time off or we're at work, but not really working.
Because
Right? We're making those phone calls and all those other things, or we're Googling trying to find the answers as to what the heck do I need to know. Well, this way you make one phone call, no stressing, no guessing, and then the lawyers call you back with the answer. Or oftentimes the lawyers can give you the answer off the top of their head, right? Because this is stuff that they do every day. This is their expertise. If you think about your expertise, someone calling and asking you a question, how often have you been able to answer it off the top of your head? Easy peasy, right? And how often have you had someone call you and say, well, you know, I Googled and I researched and I've spent all this time and I can't find the answer. And you think, well, why didn't you just call me in the first place? It's the same with lawyers. What's beautiful about this, our lawyers, as I say, became lawyers because they want to help people. They get paid in a very different way. They get paid based on how many members are in their state or province at the beginning of the month, whether they talk to 100 or 1,000, or maybe they answer 1,000 questions for the one person. Doesn't matter. They get paid the same amount and we pay them very, very well. So when you're calling them, they get to say, how can I help? Not how can I bill you?
Right.
And they get to focus their only job. They don't have to go and get new clients because we bring them the clients. We are their biggest client collectively. And they don't have to worry about billable line items and tracking all of that stuff. You know, how many times did I call Mrs. Jones and how long was I on the phone with Mr. Smith? And how many, no, they don't have to do any of that. Their only job is to service our members well. That's it. So they love it. We love it. And they follow the service standards that our corporate office, PPLSI, has set out. So for instance, I've had a couple of folks who had a family lawyer that they loved, so they weren't interested in Legal Shield. I get it. That's fine. They didn't need it. But they went to get their wills updated during COVID because, a pandemic does kind of motivate you to do such things. And their usual family lawyer said, yeah, no problem, but I can't get to you for like 10 months because I'm crazy busy. We have service standards that says as soon as the lawyer has all the information they need, they have to get you a first draft of your will within 10 business days. Suddenly, we had folks who had lawyers calling us wanting Legal Shield. We've got business owners who have lawyers they love. Great, keep them for the big scary stuff. But Legal Shield is a cost-effective way to get those little questions answered. If your lawyer is normally going to charge you for something like, do I have to pay my employees on the civic holiday? Use Legal Shield for the little things like that. Keep your lawyer for the big scary stuff, no problem. But use lawyers proactively. It'll save you time, save you so much stress, and in the long run, save you a ton of money. Because to have something dealt with initially, way cheaper than waiting, because that's the other thing people will say, oh, I don't need a lawyer yet. It's not that big of a deal yet. Yeah, it's not going to go away. It's just going to get bigger and scarier, right?
The other thing to take into consideration here too, right, Cheryl, is that there are different lawyers for different areas of expertise. So you have criminal lawyers, you have corporate lawyers, you have intellectual property lawyers, you have family lawyers, you have real estate lawyers. There's a whole spectrum of lawyers. So at any given moment throughout the journey of your business, you may need to access any of those different types of lawyers. However, if you're living in Northern Ontario and living in a rural community, you may not have access to someone who specializes in intellectual property, trademarks and patents and those types of things. You may not have access to a corporate lawyer who can help you with employment laws and standards, right? You may not have a contract lawyer to help you develop a contract to give to your clients before providing them with a service. So there's so many different areas of your business where you may need that legal support, but you may not be able to access them. And obviously, we are not all in a position to be able to throw out a $500 retainer to all of these different lawyers so that when we have a question, we can give them a call and hire them to support us. And I've seen this time and time again with my clients is, I need help with trademarks. I need help with intellectual property. I need help with corporate. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to set up, all of these different components of their business. And if you want your business to grow, there is going to be a time when you are going to have some type of legal requirement that you need to look into, right? So
absolutely. And you might not want Cousin Vinny handling a murder case. Melissa,
right?
you're probably too young to know that movie reference.
Oh, I know that movie.
If anybody hasn't seen it, it is a hilarious comedy, My Cousin Vinny. It totally illustrates this point exactly.
Yeah.
Our law firms are big enough that they have at least one lawyer specializing in every area of law. And all our law firms work collaboratively. So Melissa, let's say I know you're about to leave on vacation soon, and maybe you and your family decide you're going to drive to Florida because you've had enough of this weather. Well, we haven't had a lot yet, but it's coming apparently. So you might decide to drive to Florida and you get a speeding ticket in Tennessee. Oops. What do? You still call our Ontario law firm, and chances are they're going to introduce you to the Tennessee law firm who's going to ask about the circumstances and then let you know, could you fight it? Should you fight it? How do you fight it? And if it is a state where lawyers typically go to court, they will go to court on your behalf. And it's included.
Right.
How cool is that? The example I gave earlier, if you've got, a branch somewhere else in a different state or province, well, now, how does that work? What taxes are you collecting and paying? And what about, there are so many questions that come up when you start crossing either country or provincial lines. And so, our lawyers all work collaboratively. So you're getting the answer that matters.
Especially when it comes to the services or products that you're providing. If you're exporting products or if you're providing services out of province or out of country, there's going to be requirements there, and there, contractual laws may not apply in some situations, or, there's so many scenarios that are running through my mind. If you've provided a service to a client and the client is not paying their invoice, and you got to take them to small claims court. Though, those are all things that unfortunately happen more than we would probably like to admit. And even though we say that'll never happen to me, it does.
Yes. And, we all know the United States is a very litigious society. People are suing everybody for everything, right? On every billboard. If you're injured, call us, whatever.
Yeah. If you have a physical office location and you lease it, so you're not the property owner, but then somebody gets injured in your business, what happens next? What do?
Yep.
So many
Absolutely. Scenarios. So many scary things. And we all know whatever happens in the States starts to come here. And sure enough, there's a few billboards around the GTA. If you're injured, call us. So those ambulance chasers are out there. But the reality is, yes, you don't pay those types of lawyers that work on contingency fees. You don't pay them if you don't win. But if you do win, they take a huge chunk. The nice thing about our lawyers, because they get paid the way they do, it is in their best interests to keep you out of court, to avoid court. That is a last resort as far as they are concerned.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So they can give you an honest answer if you say, hey, do I have a case? So recently had a gentleman who's actually in Quebec. Him and his wife opened a brick and mortar business, and they wanted to do a new, for safety purposes, new walkway. They hired a contractor, obviously not their area of expertise, they're financial planners. They hired this contractor. He did most of the work and then basically disappeared. Well, he then 6 months later sicked a contract or a collector on them because they hadn't paid the bill. Like, well, why would we pay the bill? You didn't finish the job. They took him to small claims court. Unfortunately, they did not seek legal assistance and did not have Legal Shield at that point. And long story short, they were in court for an extended period of time. It turned into quite the battle. When they finally, I met them, told them about Legal Shield, they got Legal Shield, and they were able to say to our lawyers, like, hey, is it worth us taking this to the next step? What should we do? And they said, realistically, based on what you've already done, you don't have a case anymore. So don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Here's what we'd recommend. If it's okay with you, we'll write a letter on your behalf. And what's interesting is a call or a letter from a high-powered law firm has way more weight than you or I, right? We call or write a letter, it goes to the complaints department or customer service.
Yeah.
They get a letter or a phone call from a law firm, it goes to the legal department, who then talks to whoever and says, like, we don't need this hassle, fix it.
Right.
Just like that. Which, on that note, if you know anybody who is getting the runaround from their insurance company, whether it's hurricane, whether it's a car accident, whether it's health and medical, little legal muscle can ensure that those insurance companies do what they should do in a timely fashion. And I mean, how much do we pay for house insurance, property insurance, you know, if we have a commercial space, car insurance, life insurance? When you've got a crisis going on, you do not want to battle with the insurance company. You just want them to do what you've been paying them to do. That legal muscle can make all the difference.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Cheryl, does Lorelei have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you, Cheryl.
Well, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Lorelei, for being here today and for all of this important information. And as we were kind of chatting about it, I was thinking to myself, you know, I know that this is an added expense and we're all, I think, feeling that pinch, and how can we protect ourselves and, but budget for these types of expenses. And something to consider for anybody who might be watching this is Paro Circle funding. You know, we can use that funding for working capital, which I've been told would include monthly payments for services and business expenses. So that could be a really great opportunity to get yourself protected, whether it's legal, whether it's insurance, you know, any of those things. And you can use the funding that's available. So for anybody who's watching, if you feel that this is an important component to have for your business and you need some support financially to cover these expenses, please reach out to your business growth advisors or your business counselors and let us help you find funding opportunities so that we can ensure that you are protected in all areas of your business. And
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I never would have thought that